So the article that I picked out for classroom arrangement is titled Exploration of Classroom Seating Arrangement and Student Behavior in a Second Grade Classroom. So the reason that they did this study was to determine if certain seating arrangements could contribute to students being on task while doing work within a general education classroom. And they used 3 different arrangements. They did cluster seating, which is like the groups of, usually 4 is what I've seen the most. Horseshoe seating, which is where they're kind of in like a U around a board or like a teacher's desk. And then the last one is just the traditional row seating. And they did pick certain target behaviors that they were looking for to observe, and it was inappropriate talking, students out of their seats without permission, students not following directions, and students not starting independent work promptly. So they did 3 different kinds of observational data. They did anecdotal record, teacher behavior checklist, and behavior tally sheet. So they did this over 3 weeks, and so each week was a different seating arrangement, and then they did all the observations to see if one of the seating arrangements was more conducive to off-task behavior or not. And figure 1 shows the results of this study, and I think for me that was the easiest way for me to figure out if one was better than the other. And as far as getting out of their seats without permission, not following directions, and not starting work promptly, they were all pretty much the same. They all had a little bit of fluctuation, but for the most part they were across the board. But the one that moved the most was inappropriate talking. In cluster seating, that was displayed the most often. And then it went down to horseshoe seating, and then row seating was where the least amount of inappropriate talking happened. And overall, it looked like row seating was the most beneficial seating arrangement for getting rid of off-task behaviors. It had the lowest for each category of the behaviors that they observed, which I think is interesting because I feel like educators now don't do row seating at all, because it was something that was more like back in the day. So I thought that was interesting. It's definitely something that I'll be aware of when I do have my own classroom. I probably won't have a classroom of the same size as most general education classrooms, but it is something to think about. And also, I don't know to what degree I can implement these, because deaf and hard of hearing students do need to sit normally in a horseshoe so that they can see everybody and they can see an interpreter or a board all at the same time. So maybe not super applicable to me as a teacher, but definitely something that I think every educator should be cognizant of when they are arranging their classrooms. And then for the website that I chose, I did Dr. Fred Jones's Tools for Teaching, and it was about effective room arrangement. It used a lot of terminology that I've heard before in other education classes, like zones of proximity, that you do need to be aware of who is closest to you and who you might not be near at all times of instruction, and also working the crowd. Just make sure that you're hitting all your students. And a big one that I really got from the article was disrupting disruptions. So I guess that's kind of his way of saying, if you acknowledge a behavior in a way that is disruptive, I feel like you're not really handling it in the most beneficial way. You're kind of drawing more attention to something that could further your kids from being off task if they are. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think that ties in with the journal that I found really well, because it kind of explains why we think so much about classroom arrangements, and it's not just pure vanity, that we do have as teachers reasons for why we do arrange classrooms the way that we do, and why some arrangements are better than others, depending on the classroom and depending on your students. So yeah, I think classroom arrangement is something really important that teachers and aides and administrators should all be aware of and taking into consideration during the school year.